Evening all. The broadcast is live. I know we're awaiting a few people. I'm not going to rush into tonight's call. Just going to give a minute or so for some others to drop in, and then I'll start sharing my screen and get into tonight's conversation. If you check the chat box just to make sure you can hear me okay, you should be able to refresh your screen if it's a problem. Alternatively, if you've got your speakers off, then that might be part of it. The other alternative is, if you're still struggling, perhaps you log back in. Let's just have a look and see how many people we've got in the room now. Yeah, we've got a pretty decent number already. I'm going to start sharing my screen and get into the content of tonight's call, which is really about your self-image. Those of you who know us, Sue and I, we've been in this network marketing business for a very long time. As part of that, we've been working in personal development and training, mentoring, coaching for a very, very long time. I've learned a huge amount over those many years that we've been in this business. And part of my own personal study has been the way the mind works, the way change happens, the way people achieve things, the results they get in their lives, and how to help to make that happen and change. And back in the late 90s, I started running a program called Born Rich. Born Rich was a work by John Canary and Bob Proctor. Some of you may know of those two people. John Canary, who has become a personal friend of ours and has been a mentor of ours for many, many years. I've learned huge amounts from John, so much so that the Born Rich program that I facilitated for many of those years in between 99 and now has taught me huge amounts. However, it's taught me a lot, but what I found was that the programs we were running brought the same people back on them time and time and time again. And there's a particular page in the Born Rich manual which essentially asks people to describe the life they'd like to lead. And we kept getting the same people coming back with the same description, but having made very little change. And whilst I fully appreciate and understand the mechanisms for change, these people certainly didn't, because otherwise they would have been changing. And essentially it was about the concept of focus and how they actually saw themselves and how they were actually trying to drive the change. You see, most people do what we all do it to some extent. They sit and think about it, but actually don't get emotionally connected with it, because essentially, your emotions are always going to rule the day. Whatever you feel about something is going to be the way that you respond in action terms as to what you do. So I studied to become a hypnotherapist as a consequence of that sort of frustration of helping people to find their reason for doing something and for making change. That opened my eyes even further to the way that the mind actually works. Fascinating area, from pain management to motivation to real changes happening very quickly if it's done in the right way. And I aligned that back to a lot of the stuff that I was just studying with John, really, and other people. And tonight's call really is a little bit about some of those things that I've learned, and hopefully you will get some benefit from in understanding how you can help to change the results you get, because ultimately, your self-image determines what you get in your life. And this is something Henry Ford said many, many years ago: if you think you can do a thing or think you can't do a thing, you're right. Quite simply, it's about the perception you have of yourself and your ability to achieve something. So essentially what that translates into is you'll never outperform your self-image. See, if you think you're a great dancer, you may be. If you think you aren't a great dancer, which I don't, then you're likely not to get up on the dance floor too often. And those of you who do know me, who've seen me at a dance, will realize how very difficult it is for me to get up on a dance floor. I tend to have had far too much to drink before that actually occurs. And because I don't see myself as a dancer. Sue is, and our daughter Lauren is exceptional. And I look at people who can dance and think, wow, I wish I could do that. But I'm not prepared to do the things to make myself into a good dancer, because I still don't think I'd be very good at it. So I'm not a dancer. And I'm sure there are things running through your minds right now about things you don't do, you hate doing, you do because you feel you have to, and you regret it afterwards, even if you've done it okay. However, what we also have to look at is this process of change, which is that if you think you're a great dancer and you're not at the moment, you can learn to be if you put in the focus, the time, the effort, the energy. So let's look at this thing that essentially this drives. See, we're all in our comfort zones. Every single one of us is in a comfort zone. And Neil Donald Walsh, who many of you will have read or come across, very cleverly said this: life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And essentially that's where you always want to be, is just being stretched that little bit of nervousness about the next step that you take, because that's where the change really happens. Because otherwise you sit in your comfort zone and guess what you're doing? You're effectively just leaving the habits you've already developed. And this goes sort of to the nature and nurture issue. See, up to the age of 5, we're just a complete open book. We receive everything, nothing's thought of, nothing's thought about very much. There's no consideration in terms of logic going on. It's just receiving and emotionally responding to it. And slowly but slowly over time, we begin to develop habits which become the way we see our lives and how we filter the information we actually receive on an everyday basis. And we become the sum of those habits. Now, there's been a huge amount of research done into this particular area of what is a habit and how does it get formed and those sorts of things. And for any of you who are interested in it, then there's a wonderful book by a guy called Maxwell Maltz, who wrote a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Sounds a bit, off the wall, but essentially it was the study of how habits are formed in humans. It's the same in animals generally, actually. Pavlov's dog and all that kind of stuff. Same sorts of mechanisms going on here. And essentially it boils down to this. If you practice to do something over a 21-day period or thereabouts, it becomes a habit. Equally, however, you can change that habit if you practice to do something else over a 21-day period or thereabouts. But here's a word of warning. You have to continue to do it even after that, because essentially the old habit is still there. You've just overwritten it with a new behavior. But you can very easily go back to the old behavior by simply ignoring the change that you decided to undertake yourself. So you have to keep working at the change of the habit. It's a bit like, I don't know how many of you, some of you may have been smokers. I was, Sue and I were, up until mid to late 20s. And essentially, smoking is one of those funny things, because actually getting over nicotine addiction is relatively straightforward. It's in about 2 or 3 days, your body has got rid of it. You're no longer addicted to nicotine. But so why is it then that people still go back to smoking after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days? Because the habit hasn't changed. And that's the point. The habit of reaching for a cigarette, pulling one out of the packet, having one when you go to the pub or after a meal and those kinds of things, they're still there as part of the way we lead our lives. So that's one of those habits that we can change, but takes concentration and effort, because, as I say, we are the sum of our habits. So what tends to happen is that habitual thinking dictates our reaction to whatever circumstance happens to us. You see, if you're used to confronting things, then you'll go on doing that because you've developed a habit of doing it. If you're used to not confronting things and walking away or hiding from them, that's what you'll continue to do until you learn that actually confronting things makes life easier, even in the short run. And change comes through a higher level of understanding. Essentially, you have to raise your consciousness to a point where you understand that these mechanisms are going on in the background, and that so much of what you do is actually driven by the habit. And changing the habit is in that comfort zone, the end of your comfort zone. It's that place to be where it's slightly nervous because things are new and you're constantly changing. And this is much more difficult for adults to do than it is for children, because children are natural risk takers and adults become more and more risk averse the older they actually get. But action itself only comes through motivation. We touched on this on the last call, when we're talking about connecting with your why and setting goals and having a strong enough reason to actually make things happen in your life and move towards change. And that comes because of the desire you have to make change happen. And that's outside the comfort zone. You know, we all think about change. We all think we'd like to have this, that, or something else. But actually, the vast majority of us look at that potential and go, oh, well, I can't do that. Just as Henry Ford said, you know, you think you can, you can, you think you can't, you can't. However, there is a bit of good news, and that is that self-image is changeable. You probably guessed that from what I was saying in relation to, you know, Maxwell Maltz's book, because essentially we can change habits, which changes the perception, potentially the perception we actually have of ourselves. So it goes back to this word motivation. Remember from our last conversation, we were talking about the connection to emotion. And actually, change and activity happens because of your emotion, because of the way you feel about something and how important it is to you to move towards something new and embrace change. So motivation is a key element of this. Second thing is focus. You know, it's easy to have a burst of activity and then stop. But actually, it's focusing then upon that same activity again and again and again and again and again until actually, you know, it becomes comfortable. You form a new habit. And you form that habit because it's moving you into the direction of where you want to end up. And that takes effort, persistence, the avoidance of procrastination, you know, those things that stop us from actually achieving. We put in a little bit of effort and then we stop, or we cease to focus and, oh, that didn't work. Well, it actually stopped because you've stopped working. So where's your vision and where are you headed? You know, this is such an important thing to do. We talked about this a lot last time round in terms of the why. Why are you doing this? What is it that's motivating you? What are your goals? Those things are key to actually deciding where you're going to end up. So I spent a bit of time today looking at vision boards. Now, I don't know how many of you got them. And this is one I plucked off the web, which I thought was quite nice. And just essentially externalizing the vision this person has of themselves. Now, why is this important? Well, firstly, you're engaging new senses. Second, i.e., in this instance, you're engaging your visual sense, but you're actually also engaging your physical senses in terms of the fact you've externalized your own thinking. By, you know, again, I covered this very briefly last time, but the more you put it out of yourself, strangely enough, the more it resonates within. And that resonation creates the potential for manifestation. And that's what's being seen here. This person's focusing on the things that are important to them, as in particular. I am not a triathlete, but this person is. This is someone who wants to excel at that particular thing. But there's also elements of spirituality. There's a certain amount of materialism involved in this. There's certainly elements of love and relationship. And this, for them, resonates with the way they are, the person they are, where they want to end up. And the essence of them is expressed in this vision board. If you don't have one, or you haven't written your goals, as we talked about last time round, take the time out to go through this process, because it makes a real difference to you. Here's another one. Slightly different attack on this. Lots of words here. This is someone who internalizes a lot. And I'm just going to show you very briefly mine. There you go. And this is an issue for me, action. That's probably why it's written right in the middle. Taking action is a key issue. You know, I do a lot of thinking. I'm as John would tell me every time I see him, I'm a cerebral. In other words, I'm one of those people who thinks a lot. Actually, thinking and action sometimes are incompatible. But essentially, this for me is what the elements you will see here about giving back, taking action, achieving things, helping others to do the same. This is my vision board of what I'm seeking for myself in my life at this particular moment in time. And of course, bear this thought in mind: whatever vision you have is likely to change over time, because what's important to you at certain life stages is not important to others. And so I would encourage all of you to take the time out to sit and really think about what it is you want, what it is, how you see yourself, what you'd like to achieve in your life. Create something that means something to you and resonates, because the more it resonates, the more likely it is that you're going to bring it about. So Let's talk about attitudes and the obstacles to change, because these are things that are really important to appreciate. And I know you're all going to agree with all of these because it's impossible not to. We all suffer from them to a greater or lesser degree, and they're important to recognize, and it's not to criticize. So what we're looking at first is ignorance. In other words, you don't know. You don't know that you're aware, or you don't know you're unaware. You know, there's this issue of being aware you're unaware, aware of being unaware, and then aware of being aware. Once you wake up, ignorance is dispelled. It makes it much clearer about where you need to go next. However, that can lead also, when you do know things, it can lead to a certain amount of confusion. So it's clarity of thought that makes the change happen. When you fully appreciate and understand where you want to go, that gets rid of the ignorance that holds you back. This is probably the most important one of all. Fear. Effectively, it's the fear of something happening that might happen, that resonates with something inside you that stops you from doing things. Fear needs to be confronted in this respect, because it is something that is really holds us all back to a greater or a lesser degree, and you need to face it, share it, and overcome it. And that doesn't mean it's easy to do. What it means is it's something to do. Share it, and it's easier to do it. Poor habits. Well, we all have these to some extent. It's much easier to do things we like to do than do the things we know we should do, or we ought to do, or we can do. The reason why poor habits are there is very often because, you know, we're not on the edge of our comfort zone. We're happy to stay where we are. Well, actually, most people aren't happy to stay where they are, but they're just not happy enough to change their habits. So it's a point of focus. What habits are holding you back? What is it you don't do? What is it you do that actually sucks up the time you've got, which makes it unavailable for you to have time to do other things and develop better habits? Lack of skills. This is probably one of the easiest things to change. Once you've identified what the lack of skill is, you simply go out and find it. Now, in the context of what we do, what we all do, if it's connecting with people, then talk to Sue and me. If it's phoning people, talk to Sue and me. If it's whatever it is in relation to developing your business skills, then we can help you to do that. So lack of skills is not an excuse for poor habits. A lack of skills we can modify and rectify pretty quickly, actually, and help you to overcome those really quickly. Then changing poor habits becomes much easier. Lastly is this sort of low staying power, no stamina, no focus. Effectively, it's no focus, because if you don't have staying power, what that means is your desire and motivation is fairly low, too easily swayed. And that's something that, again, is easy to be. You know, it's a bit, I think I'll go and make a cup of coffee instead of picking that phone up. You know, it's low levels of staying power, because essentially, as we discussed on our last call, you know, this business is about connecting with people regularly, connecting with enough people. If you connect with enough people, there's a very simple outcome in all of this, and that is you will achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So your staying power is as important as everything else. Okay. Let's just look at the emotional barriers you have, because I started out this evening on talking about emotion always trumps, you know, before the thought. It gets you to the point where you will have an emotional reaction to the thinking that you have. If you're thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to make 50 phone calls this week, then you're screaming inside saying, no, I won't, no, I won't, no, I won't. Guess what's going to happen? You won't. If you're sitting to yourself emotionally connected with the idea of making those 50 phone calls, guess what's going to happen? You'll make them. And I'll tell you something else. At the end of the week, when you've made them, you'll feel absolutely brilliant. But the emotional barrier is getting in the way. You see, doubt, guilt. Oh, let me just touch on doubt for a second. I mentioned it last time as well. Doubt and action are incompatible. So if you doubt what you're doing, you're not going to take action. if you look at other people and realize that those people have overcome doubt, so they continue to do and take the action, then guess what? The doubt disappears, you get on and do it. And what happens if you do doubt? Well, you feel guilty about doubting it. And so now we've got a double whammy involved. And then there's a resentment that builds up over the fact that you're not doing it and you're doubting it. You're feeling guilty and doubting it, and you're thinking, I'm resenting myself for this as much as resenting other people who are potentially making good progress. Then there's jealousy of those who are, and well, same thing really, a little bit of envy. And of course it comes back to that word fear again. There's the fear of change, there's the fear of progression, there's the fear of doing rather than the fear of not doing. So how do you overcome all this? Number one is appreciate yourself for who and what you are, because essentially you're at a position, but where I'm assuming people on this call want to change. You actually got to want to change, because otherwise you will go on getting the results you've got. What's that well-hackneyed phrase about the definition of madness? Is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So you've got to create change. You can only create change by doing new things, by being more than you are right now. So you've got to want to change, and you must want to change. And you've got to therefore have a strong reason to do it. What is it that's making you, moving you towards doing it? Create the vision board, because that helps you to focus upon the things you want to have rather than the things you actually have. And of course, you've got to be committed to it. And that means having staying power. We talked about that a little earlier. It's the commitment to change and the continued process of applying yourself to making that change. 21 days to form a habit, 21 days to change a habit. And therefore, it's not going to happen in a heartbeat. It doesn't. You just have to keep doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it. I'm going to illustrate this in a second. However, we all have stopping points where we come to a wall. So what do? Well, here's breakthrough number 2. This represents your mind and your activity. You see the large circle with the split in the middle. I'm crediting John and John Canary and Bob Proctor for this, because this is where I first saw it. It's the representation of the mind in the body. The little four sticks on the bottom are the arms, legs. The top's the head, because that's where the action's happening, and the top part of that's the conscious and the subconscious underneath. They are different to each other. And here we have someone who's got an X-type idea in their conscious mind. This is a conscious thought about something that want to have happen. So it could be you want to give up smoking, could be you want to pass your driving test, could be you'd like to create a certain amount of income, could be that you'd like to leave the job you're in, could be anything that you can conceive, essentially. It's an idea that you have right now, which is being delivered by your subconscious mind, because that's where the action happens. So your two parts of your personality, your conscious and your subconscious, are in harmony. You have an X-type idea in your consciousness, and you have an X-type idea in your subconscious, and you're getting results moving you towards wherever that will take you. So if you do nothing to change any of this, you can pretty much predict where you'll be in a year's time, 5 years' time, based on what you're doing right now. Now, if that doesn't feel comfortable, you don't like the idea of that, then now you have to feel a little bit more uncomfortable, because you've got to change the concept of where you are going to end up. So let's look at this and turn the X idea into a Y idea. So in your conscious mind, you're saying to yourself, well, what I'd really like is something new, something different. I don't want the things I have right now. It could be anything. It could be physical, could be emotional, could be spiritual, could be in terms of possessions, could be lifestyle, could be any kind of thing that's important to you. For all of us, it's different. That's why your vision board will be different to mine. So here's this conscious idea that you've got another thought in your mind. I'd like to move towards something new. But you've still got the X-type conditioning. Your subconscious, where the work happens, is still in X-type vibration. So you're thinking on a conscious level at a Y vibration, which is incompatible with an X-type vibration. So how do you actually make that change? What you do is you focus upon the Y-type idea continually, not continuously. That means it's got to dominate the thinking you have, and engaging with that concept in a way which helps you to change the X-type conditioning in your subconscious to Y-type conditioning. And the way we do that is, as we've been describing, we create new habits. We do things we've not been comfortable doing in the past. We do things that are compatible with where we want to end up. That means doing new stuff, taking new action. So where does that get you at some point? You see, here's where the potential stopping point is. Because if you lack staying power, what happens is you've got all this concept, you're thinking about this Y-type idea so much, you've got Y in your conscious, but still X in your subconscious. And this is where the danger lies, because you start to think this progression's not happening fast enough. It doesn't always happen quickly. You have to keep going at it, be persistent, consistent, and have the tenacity to continue. So you've got this Y thinking with this, still with the X-type vibration producing the X-type results that you've been getting before. And what happens to a lot of people is they just simply slide backwards. Back to the X-type thinking, the X-type expectations, the X-type energy and output, and that's what happens. This is what is one of the reasons why I was explaining, you know, my response to people coming back on the Born Rich program year after year after year with exactly the same concept of who and what they were and what they wanted in their lives, but actually not having made any kind of change at all. And that was one of the reasons why I started to look at how, you know, you can affect more rapid change in subconscious thinking. So to keep it going, you've got to push yourself towards it. That's what the vision board helps you to do. It's what focusing upon the new habit development does. And as you move forward, effectively what happens is you turn your X-type conditioning into Y-type conditioning. So you've got X-type results at the bottom, X-type results at the top, and in the middle, and X-type results at the bottom, right at the top, but still with the Y-type idea. So freedom comes by turning Y into Y-type activity and Y-type results. Now, the reason why this is around this way is because where the discomfort happens is having a Y-type concept in your conscious mind, taking Y-type activity, which helps your subconscious to accept it as a norm. And this is where the struggle for most people lies, because the Y-type activity is incompatible with X-type conditioning. That means that you have to push through it. You've got to focus on doing the work in order to make the work effective. As you do the work becomes part of your comfort zone. Think about it like this. There was a time when you couldn't ride a bike. I'm assuming all of you can ride a bike. Maybe there are those who can't. I'm currently watching our grandson beginning to ride a bike. And actually, he's a complete natural, which is quite scary, but he falls off. Like but you know, gets up and goes again. And it's important enough to him to be able to do it because he gets a lot of excitement out of it, pleasure and joy, that when he falls off, he gets up, gets back on and whizzes off again. And he's going to go on falling off. He'll probably go on falling off all his life. But what he's doing is it's important enough for him to go on practicing the activity in order to get good at it, so that when he does jump on a bike, you know, he's got the Y-type conditioning with the Y-type thought. In some ways, we all need to reconnect with what we had when we were children, small children. That sort of joy of change, because that's essentially what they're learning. Everything's new to them. There's no conditioning, and the past is in the past. In other words, we're ignoring the situation that's brought us to where we are now, because that's history. We simply go forward on the basis of a new concept for ourselves. We can only do that if we're prepared to take the activity in order to bring it about. So your self-image, our self-image, everybody's self-image dictates what we have, who we are, what we think of ourselves, and what we think we're capable of achieving. To change that means that we have to focus upon a new idea, a new concept for ourselves, a new image of ourselves, and then develop the skills and the thinking in order to create that image and turn it into reality. So I hope that's been helpful. I've covered quite a lot of ground tonight. Sue's just telling me there are some questions. Let me just.
No, I can read them out to you.
Okay.
First question, I hope you can hear me. Sue here. First question is from Chris. And Chris is saying he's got lots of lovely friends on Facebook who, if they think they could actually get the vision, that they'd be superb at MLM. And that's always the case. But he's asking, are there any good phrases or good approaches to create or to get people to chat with Sue and Nigel without showing them too much? I've shown my site, but nowhere getting them to the three-way chat.
Okay, well, it's a numbers game, basically. You have to keep sharing it with people in ways which give them a new perspective, because essentially they're receiving information based on their own filters. And what I mean by that is that everybody receives information in a way which is filtered by their own current thinking. So you have to keep trying to put it across in a way which appears to be attractive. You see, what people don't do is suddenly beat a path to your door. Well, not very often, although it does happen. They don't beat a path to your door begging to be signed up and become a distributor. It's based on continual exposure. So there's no secret trick to the concept of saying that, you know, I've got this brilliant idea, you should buy into it. It's a question of putting it across to people in ways that they will receive the information differently, ultimately sparking some form of interest in what you have to offer. So keep presenting information to them in different ways. I mean, when I was putting tonight's presentation together, I was actually looking back at an old presentation I did some years ago in relation to sales, oddly enough. And actually, you know, 80% of sales happen on the 5th conversation, according to the American Sales Association. I always thought it was the 7th, actually, but I rechecked my facts because I wanted to see what it is. 80% on the 5th conversation. But, you know, most people give up connecting with potential customers on the 2nd or 3rd conversation. So 80% of sales are made on the 5th, and 80% of sales are made by 20% of salespeople because they continue to connect. So what I'm really saying is it's about persistence. It's about presenting the same information in a different way that resonates with people differently, because everyone is different. We can get, perhaps on a future call, we'll get into how people receive information based upon their personality type. And in fact, just on that note, very quickly, John Canary is coming to the UK probably late August, early September. He's going to do a session on body forms, what we call body forms. Every single one of us expresses who we are and how we think through the shape that we are. Now, I know this might sound a bit strange, but essentially your internal world is reflected in your external world. In other words, what you say physically to your external world demonstrates and indicates the way you think internally. So you can interpret that, and it helps to understand the way to communicate with those people more readily. And John's going to do a full session on exactly how that works. And we're going to video that and use it as an online training program that's going to be available to everybody within our group. And you will find it not only fascinating, but exceptionally effective and useful. So, sorry, I've kind of sidetracked a bit. I don't know whether that really answers your question, Chris. I mean, I can give you words and ideas, but essentially it's about presenting the same thing in different ways all the time.
One last question. This is from Joan out in Las Vegas. She's asking, is there an internet marketing company that we can connect to who would help us in getting our message out before the masses? I've been hearing and seeing about a system called TTO, but it's exclusive, and it's assumed they build their own private network within Jeunesse. Now, Joan is actually talking about something called Market Bolt and marketbolt.com, and they've actually produced a fantastic website that actually gives you a great landing page. It gives you an ongoing way of sharing it without the complication of having to register into Jeunesse. So in my view, MarketBolt is a fantastic product, and it can be linked to your website So it's, if you've got a shortened name, or I mean, ours is Viva 121. We could do it on ours. I know that Judith has one already, and a lot of people are doing that. So that is a way of doing it, but there are lots of different ways that you can get out to the masses. Joan, I will email you separately because I had a conversation today with someone. So I really just, kind of, so that you can sort that in the States, because it works differently in America than it does in the UK.
Okay, I think that's probably the end of tonight's call. Thanks everyone for coming on. I hope it's been helpful. We're going to be running these, or I'm going to be running these, once a week or thereabouts. Next week, I've agreed with John, well, hopefully the technology allowing, John's going to give us the benefit of his unbelievable wisdom. He's going to run one of these sessions for us, and be probably more insightful than I am. And I know you'll get huge value out of what he can tell you, and share with you and help you to actually make real change in your lives. So thanks everyone for your time and attention tonight. And we look forward to seeing you next time round.